and the consolations of philosophy, which are not negligible. We have a much finer tradition than those of the rival muttering priesthoods.
But poison poisons everything? Is it as insidious as that?
I think any even small dose of the sleep of reason, even when reason nods off for a second, unreason and barbarism are waiting to rush in. It's a full-time job, just keeping the mind alive in the face of these challenges from superstition and irrationality.
Are you an equal opportunity offender? Is it every faith, every religion that you're leveling this charge at?
Well, they're all equal glimpses of the same untruth, and they all demand the surrender of reason, and they all assert impossible things with no evidence, and they all hope for an everlasting dictatorship. I mean, religion is, among other things, I should have said this earlier, provides us with a great insight into the origins of totalitarianism. What would it be like if it was true? I mean, I'm an anti-theist, remember, as you kindly said in the introduction. It's not. You could be an atheist and wish, nonetheless, that the evidence would support the existence of such a system. I don't, because it would be like demanding to live in a celestial North Korea, where you are completely supervised and invigilated without let-up every instant of your life from conception until death, and that's when the fun really begins. Because you either go to a paradise which, according to every description I've ever read, would be hellish, consisting of eternal praise and perfect servitude, unending and benign, worst of all, a benign dictatorship. Or you go for a lifetime of torture for an offence that you probably couldn't have failed to commit because, as was well said about religion once, it postulates that we're created diseased and then ordered to be well.
Christopher Hitchens.
This is a disgusting idea.
Christopher Hitchens, let's take a call from Camille in Charleston, South Carolina. Camille, you're on the air.
Hi. I actually agree with most of what your guest is saying. However, there is an aspect to it which I do not, and that aspect being equating religion and God as the same thing.
Well, you say they're different?
Oh, well, I think I know what she means. Yes, they are different. I mean, as I've said, you can believe in God, you can be a deist, as Thomas Jefferson was, for example. It was very common among enlightened people of that part of the 18th century. They thought, look, this is pre-Darwin, pre-Einstein. Darwin wasn't going to be born till the same day as Abraham Lincoln, funnily enough. Look, it does seem as if there's an order to the known universe, as if it has some predictable rhythms. It seems to have a pattern. So it's very difficult to think that there's no designer involved here.
Can an anti-theist be a deist?
Sorry?
Can an anti-theist like you be a deist like Jefferson?
Well, just give me a second.
Yeah.
So you can believe that that's the case, but you're not a religious person because you don't think that God gives you instructions or intervenes in the human life. Religion means that you claim that you know God's mind. It's an impossibly grandiose claim, but many people think they can make it. An anti-theist says that it would be horrible if it was true, but fortunately there is less than zero evidence for it.
For what?
And for the proposition that there's a creator.
So Jefferson...
As for the proposition that there's a creator who intervenes, ludicrous proposition. So one simply adds to the dismissal of the hypothesis that one dismisses it with great relief because of the horrific nature of the horrific character of the regime of totalitarianism that would be implied if the false claims of religion were valid.
So maybe they're not the same thing, but you're not eager to dive in there anyway. Let's get another call from Sherry, Portsmouth, Virginia. Sherry, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking the call.
Certainly.
Having been raised in the South here in Virginia, and I'm an African American, I've always viewed religion as being something that was used to pacify slaves. And so it continues into the present day that it was created by slaveholders basically to pacify slaves, on earth so they could deal with the suffering of slavery and then ultimately get their heaven in the afterlife. And I see that is still holding us back in the 21st century because we have a great deal of people who are willing to allow anything to happen in the name of God as a way of being able to sort of deal with the continued inequities of the legacy of slavery.
But do you see no countervailing benefit from religion? I mean, it may have been used that way, but could it still not be valuable in some way, Sherry?
Well, I mean, certainly, it is the opiate of the masses in many ways. And yes, with all of the problems and trials and tribulations that we face, it is a way of keeping people, I think, from just running into the streets screaming insanely, because it is a way of being able to avoid the reality of what we have to deal with. And what I think that what happens, it allows people to live in an Alice in Wonderland kind of world, because everything will be okay if we just kind of give it over to God as opposed to actually dealing with the issues. And so, and I guess in essence, no, I don't think that it's really helpful at this point, because it allows people to avoid the consequences and the reality of what they need to be dealing with.
Sherry, thanks for your call. Christopher Hitchens poisons everything, including race relations, makes slaves.
I mean, there's a tough lady, I must say. Of course, she's right that things like vicarious redemption, the idea that you can not just have your sins forgiven, but have them cancelled altogether by the suffering of another person, is
for
a
example,
horrible
Jesus.
Yes, is a horrible scapegoating idea. I mean, I can offer to pay your debt if you've run out of money, or I could offer, if I really loved you, to take your turn and serve your time in prison, but I cannot relieve you of your responsibilities. I can't say you didn't commit this sin. I can't forgive you in that sense, and I can't certainly offer to do so by means of a disgusting human sacrifice. I mean, this is an abdication of responsibility in my view. I would, if asked, say that some Christians had played a very important role in abolishing slavery and also in forwarding the cause of civil rights. In my book, I say that they didn't need to be Christian to do this, and that the case for abolishing slavery and for civil rights had been made for a long time by secularists and by unbelievers. But still...
But the fact that believers carried the torch and made it happen
nonetheless,
counts for nothing?
I think one must give credit to those who did do so, though it's very difficult to connect it actually to their beliefs, because there's nothing in the Old or New Testament that says slaves should be free. There's just a great deal that says there should be slavery. So I can see why it took them a long time to get round to demanding this in the name of God, because the evidence is the other way.
Sherry,
the New Testament contains the warrant for slavery.
Yeah. Sherry, thanks.
The Old Testament contains the warrant for slavery.
Right. I want to turn to the prose here for a minute, if I can. You've given it plenty of thought and a lot of ink. Sherry, thanks for your call. I want to go now to Munster, Indiana, and to Stephan Munsey. He's senior pastor of the Family Christian Center, a 10,000-member megachurch there. He's author of Unleashing Your God-Given Dreams. He's been listening. Reverend Stephan Munsey, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Tom.
So here we've got a kind of soup-to-nuts slashing critique of not just Christianity but all religion by Christopher Hitchens. You've been listening. He says it's not true, it's coercive, it's a source of violence, there's a better way, reason. What do you say, Pastor?
Well, first of all, Christopher Hitchens is absolutely incredibly talented. All of his other books are great. I love his writings, but he's dead wrong on this one. And the reason why is because he can't go up against the testimony of believers. Because he believes something, I believe something, we will stand at the pulpits or podiums and we will debate because our belief systems have experienced and produces a testimony.
And so you believe what he doesn't, and you see it just as a standoff, a face-off. Is that
Definitely,
satisfactory?
Because he's out to prove that my testimony and my salutations of my belief in a God is dead wrong. And I do agree with him on the fact that I think religion has poisoned a lot of things, because religion is a man-made issue. But when it comes to believing in a deity, he has to ask himself this question in all of his studies, which he's a great writer, and this book is well written because I read the book, that there is no culture, no city, no kingdom that has ever been created or ever been in history that there has not been prayers, oath, oracles, sacrifices that men have prayed or believed in something of a higher power.
Does that prove that it's right and good, or is that what you're saying, because it's always existed?